Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile. This week is week 1 of 4 of our series, Indiana Jones. Today, we are talking about 1981's Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, I said Raiders of the Lost Ark and not Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark on purpose. We're going to talk about that and a bunch more. Jake, what are your opening thoughts on Raiders of the Lost Ark?
First episode, and he's already getting into the technicalities. I love it. This is gonna be. I'm very excited for this 4-part series. When we made the schedule, this was the month that I was like, these are gonna be great episodes because I love Indiana Jones. You can't tell by depth perception is weird. That Indiana Jones poster,
Yeah,
the
that thing over
Raiders,
there. Yeah.
yeah, the Raiders of the Lost Ark poster. I love Indiana Jones. I know you love Indiana Jones. Um, and so these are just great movies. I knew I loved this movie. I probably could have filled out my trademark one-sheeted notes without even watching it, but I still watched it because I love it that much. And watching it again made me realize how much I love it even more. I mean,
Yeah.
literally, I'm a big IMDb user, and I was pulling up stuff on my phone, looking up some trivia and stuff, and I saw that I had given it 9 stars out of 10. And then after watching it, I'm like, why only 9? Let's give it 10.
Yeah,
Um,
that's disrespectful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Harrison Ford is gonna bust down my door and make me give
He's
it
gonna bust
10.
down your door and kick your ass. He's 80 and he could kick your ass.
He very well could. And I would love every minute of it.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, no, this movie for me, I so typically in for the cinephile, and pardon my voice, by the way, the allergy season is upon us, and it is like the worst allergy season in like 140 years, I
It's
heard.
bad. Yeah, a lot of
And
people I know have
I'm
said that they're really.
feeling it. I'm feeling it hardcore. So pardon my voice, but typically I watch the movie like a day or two beforehand. But I had the opportunity last week to go and see Raiders of the Lost Ark on the big screen in IMAX. And of course, Jake was busy that day. So Sammy
Yeah.
Dub, shout out Sammy Dub. He came and watched it with me. And I told him, I was like, hey, in June, we're doing Indiana Jones. I'm really excited. It's gonna be a fun time. And I walked out of that movie appreciating it even more. And it is a movie that I've seen tens of times. I can't say I've seen a movie 100 times ever because I'm only 25, but it's a movie I've seen tens of times. And it's a movie. It's so rewatchable because it is so good that you can watch it all the time. And I mean, you could probably get tired of it, but from a kind of narrative point of view, it's never not exciting.
It's so good. It really I know the inspiration for this is old school adventure movies. That's one thing that's common about George Lucas stories is he's always trying to uh it seems like he's always trying to riff off things that he remembers from his childhood. And I think that really connects well with audiences. Obviously Star Wars and Indiana Jones, two of the biggest franchises in film history, both stories created by George Lucas. But I think there's such a childlike fun and adventure about really all the Indiana Jones movies, but especially this movie. Kicking things off. It's fun. It's exciting. It's playful. It's all around spectacular. I cannot say enough good things about this movie.
Yeah, and I think one of the to kind of start us off, I want to talk about Nazis. Um,
Let's start with the Nazis.
let's start with the Nazis. Um, they are the ultimate antagonist.
Of course.
I've heard it said that, well, and also the best Indiana Jones movies are the ones where he's punching Nazis.
Yes.
But we can all rally around the antagonist that is the Nazi Party and Hitler. And so I think it's actually really smart, and it adds more appeal to have Hitler and the Nazis and this idea of them trying to take over what they would consider like a weapon and use
Yeah.
the Ark as a weapon. Them doing that makes for a really compelling antagonist. A lot of films, especially nowadays, kind of sleep on the antagonist. They don't really they're focused more on the protagonist. And in this, I feel like that's not necessarily the case. But you're absolutely right. This movie was made because George Lucas wanted to kind of make an adventure serial based on the 1930s films that he would watch. And so he and Spielberg got together and came up with this idea of Raiders of the Lost Ark, obviously using the backdrop of World War II and the Nazis and Hitler's kind of fascination with the occult to kind of drive home that idea of, okay, the adventure is, okay, you're trying to find this lost artifact, but it's not just about finding an artifact. It's also about trying to find it before the Nazis get it, because if the Nazis get it, it's going to be put in the wrong hands. And so um, you have this protagonist in Indiana Jones himself, who is, I don't want to say a flawed character, but he's certainly not a squeaky clean character. Because what he does is he doesn't steal artifacts, but he takes artifacts and puts them in a museum, which is fine. But it's like some things are meant to be left alone, and that's another kind of idea that is brought up in this film. Is like, okay, the Ark was not meant to be disturbed, so why are we disturbing it? For what? Because the Nazis want it, or we're just stealing it so the Nazis don't get it. So it's just, it has such a sense of adventure, and the stakes are there because the antagonist and Spielberg and company didn't really even need to develop the antagonist all that much, because it was already developed for them, so they could focus more time on the adventure, on the action, on the swashbuckling nature of a archaeologist, which is kind of a weird thing to say.
Yeah. No, I think you're exactly right. The inclusion of the Nazis is it's a smart story move, because everyone who has two brain cells that they can rub together agrees that the Nazis are the ultimate villain ever. If you disagree with that statement, please stop watching the podcast. I don't even want to be associated with you.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. But no, and I think you point out something that's really important, that it has the elements of fun and adventure, and that childlike quality almost. I say childlike, you feel almost like a child watching this.
Yeah. Well, I feel like a child most days when I wake up and I have no money and I have no idea what the heck I'm doing. That's called being an adult, is feeling like a child.
Yeah. What do they say? Adult, or becoming an adult, is realizing that adults don't have everything together at all ever. They just fake it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And the generation before is always like way more elite at faking it than we are.
Like, exactly. But no, there's this childlike quality in the way that you root for Indy through his adventures. And at the same time, it's able to have some really, really important stakes. This movie showcases really the brilliance of Steven Spielberg as a director and as a storyteller, because his movies, especially, I would say, really pre-90s, his early works, if you want to call them, his blockbusters, have this sense of awe and fascination that reminds you of being a child. And right. that experience you had seeing movies on the big screen in the theaters. But at the same time, connecting with adult audiences, because these films have actual stakes, right? There is a struggle for good and evil, and there is a struggle to prevent evil from winning. And so I think that this film just brilliantly illustrates how good a filmmaker Steven Spielberg is. And another thing you pointed out that I'm going to slightly disagree with, you said that they don't have to spend time developing the antagonist because because it's the Nazis and everyone knows. You don't have to spend time developing the Nazis. I agree with that part. But really, this movie, I feel like Belloc is really kind of Indy's antagonist throughout this whole thing, right? He's the Nazis are kind of this. I mean, we have a few named characters that I didn't even bother writing down their character names, but the Nazis hire Belloc, Indy's professional rival. I mean, is introduced from the first sequence of the movie as as a professional rival that seems to always get the better of Indy. Seems to wait for Indy to do all the hard work and then swoop in and steal the treasure. And
Yeah.
so
Classic.
I think Indy and Belloc's relationship, that's something that really stood out to me on this rewatch. I love how they play off each other. Belloc is played by, I wrote it down, Paul Freeman. I think he does a wonderful job. I really enjoyed his performance in this movie, and I think he really stands up toe to toe with Indy, not necessarily on a physical level. Indy's very much get your hands dirty. He's not afraid to get in a fist fight or a gun fight or
Sort of. Well,
almost a sword fight. We'll get to
almost
that.
a sword fight.
We'll get to that a little later. But Indy's not afraid to get his hands dirty, whereas Belloc always hires his muscle out. He pays people to do his dirty work for him. But I think they are good matches for each other intellectually, right? Trying to outsmart each other, outthink each other, outwit each other, trying to, that game of chess, being one step ahead of each other. So I think I really liked this rewatch. I really liked Belloc's character and how he and Indy kind of play off each other. This first iteration of, it's the first time we see Indy. And so kind of, having a character that he seems maybe a little bit older, a little bit more cunning, maybe a little bit more experienced, in a cynical way. We like to think of Indy, oh, he's stealing these artifacts so they can be preserved in a museum and people can learn about them, whereas Belloc steals them to sell on the black market to, collectors and whatnot, and he's in it just for the money. But I think their relationship is really interesting in this movie.
Well, I mean, honestly, Indy and Belloc is Indy if he sold out.
Yeah.
Like honestly, and that's what I think is interesting is there's this dichotomy, because you're right, he's definitely an antagonist, but it kind of shows, like, if Indy didn't have kind of the moral standard or the what's the right word for this?
It's like Indy has this like altruistic quality that
Yes,
Belloc
yeah,
lacks.
that Belloc lacks. And so it's interesting to see, because we almost see like, okay, what if Indy doesn't have that quality?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Belloc is. And I think that helps you root for Indy even more.
Yeah.
Because you see, okay, he's choosing like this path of like for good, if you will. And so yeah, no, I think Belloc, he's used in this movie. I kind of wanted to see more from him, kind of more of their backstory, because what I appreciate about this film is like it's you jump right into the action. And so you're not being spoon-fed story or backstory. It's purposefully non-existent. For most of the film, many of the elements of his backstory. But when that happens, the audience is automatically curious, okay, what actually happened between them? Obviously, we know that this guy's an antagonist, and it's refreshing to see that they're not, doing an origin story. But at the same time, you still kind of want the origin story.
Right.
But yeah, I think Belloc as an antagonist for Indy is a good point, because I guess you could say like it's basically America versus Germany, is the other kind of parallel there, on who's getting the arc first. But if we're talking about Belloc, I mean, we can't talk about Belloc without talking about Sala, um,
I
who
love
is
Sala.
an absolute unit in this movie. He's so awesome. And John Rhys-Davies, who plays him, um, I think does just captures this excitement
Hmm.
about kind of even archaeology, but like Egyptian culture in a way
Yeah,
um, that Indy doesn't have because Indy's a little bit more. I don't want to say cynical, but he's like focused more on the mission, if you will.
yeah.
And then we have this kind of a lighter, fun character that um, kind of helps us to balance all these heavy stakes
Hmm.
with this kind of light, fun, I'm the monarch of the sea.
Yeah. No, Sala is a
um,
very fun character. I enjoy him a lot. And I think you point out something interesting because you're right, Indy is cynical when it comes to um the supernatural, right? He I think there's a point when he says to Brody um towards the beginning when he first gets kind of recruited for the mission that he doesn't believe in I don't know if he calls it mumbo jumbo or all that,
yeah,
basically all the supernatural things that Brody's
Hocus
trying to,
Pocus, I think maybe.
yeah, Brody's trying to warn him about, this is the Ark of the Covenant, according to the Bible and other sources, like it has supernatural powers. And that's why Hitler's after it for these supernatural powers. And it's been lost to time for a reason. And then he kind of just brushes him aside. But Sala, which is interesting that Sala is it's interesting that Sala is the character that again warns Indy about kind of the supernatural powers that he's meddling in, perhaps, or that he's getting involved in when going to look for the Ark. It's interesting that Sala is the one that introduces it because I'm thinking about this movie on a level that you probably it's not important to think about it, but I'm a nerd and I've seen it that many times, so I'm going to go
I
there.
know.
Um, Egypt in the 30s, like Salah is almost, I'm almost positive that Salah is Muslim. So
Yeah.
like he doesn't, I don't know a lot about Islam, but I don't think they like is like the Ark and Moses and the Ten Commandments, like is that part of the Quran and in their tradition? I'm not sure. I know
I believe it is. They're
there's
Abrahamic
yeah,
religions. So I believe so, but still, obviously, it doesn't hold the place that the Ark holds in Judaism,
right.
or even Christianity.
Yeah. Um, but even, like I said, Harrison Ford would say, "Hey, kid, it ain't that kind of movie." Um, if he heard me talking like this, but I still think it's interesting that Salah, you know, he, you're right. He is kind of aware or skeptic or not skeptical, but hesitant of the Ark's supernatural powers, and he seems to understand what they're getting into more than Indy does. So I think
Right.
he's a good foil for that, while still being a fun and lighthearted character for this movie. I think I John Rhys-Davies, his performance is so good, and he and Harrison Ford play off each other so well
They
that
have great chemistry.
they're able to convey in what really amounts to very little screen time, especially like at the beginning, like right off the bat, we are like, these guys have been friends forever. And through like, like you get that after like 5 minutes of dialogue. You see that relationship so well. And so I think that that's a credit to both Harrison Ford and John Rhys-Davies, both their performances in this, that they're able to pull that off seemingly so effortlessly.
Yeah, and I think now that we're talking about this, I think some of these characters, Belloc, um, Sulla, Marion Ravenwood, um, all of these characters kind of or Marcus Brody. All of these characters fill in Indy's blind spots in a way.
Yeah.
Right, because Indy is a flawed character, and so when he doesn't really care about the occult, you've got somebody like a Marcus or a Sola that's like, hey, this is unlike anything you've gone after before. So I appreciate, because okay, it's one thing to have these side characters and to not really explain backstory, but it's another thing to have them each serve a purpose. And so you see purpose in why it's not just, oh, this is Indy's contact um in Egypt, in Cairo. No, it's much more than that.
Yeah.
He's kind of almost like an advisor is not the right word, but he's a partner in it,
Mm-hmm.
and he kind of is the more skeptic of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And so they balance out each other really well. So yeah, no, I think Saul is a great character. I also want to talk about Marion Ravenwood,
Mm-hmm.
played by Karen Allen. Um, Good God, she's good in this movie.
She's incredible. I mean,
She's so good.
Harrison Ford gives such a powerful performance as Indiana Jones. It would take an equally powerful actress to give a performance that not only can stand up to the tenacity of Indiana Jones, but really put him in his place when he needs it and it not feel forced. And I think Karen Allen pulls that off flawlessly. She's got the wit, she's got the grit, she's got.
I mean, she's feisty.
Yes.
She's smart.
Yeah.
And she's she's such an equal
Mm-hmm.
in this movie. And the only other, she's got the kind of snark of like a Princess Leia, but
Yeah.
like to the nth degree. I
Yeah.
mean, when we meet this character, she's drinking a guy under the table. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, she freaking finessed him out of some money. Everybody, she's like, "Oh, I'm drunk," and then the other guy just kind of smiles, and then he just doesn't stop smiling and kind of leans out. I mean, so she's like spunky,
Yeah.
and I think that's very interesting too. I mean, their chemistry is so good
Yeah.
in this. And obviously they had been dating or in a relationship before, and we didn't see that on screen. And it was like 10 years prior.
Mm-hmm.
And now he kind of comes calling again. And she was mad at him, but low-key was glad to see him.
Yeah.
Like from the beginning, you could kind of tell she's like, I hated you. And I was just like, yeah, but you're also really glad to see him, aren't you?
Yeah.
Like you ain't that sly. And I mean, and she isn't the damsel in distress.
Oh
She's
no.
like, she's not a damsel in distress, and she's also not a femme fatale.
Mm-hmm.
She's like that middle ground of just a spunky, somebody who can hold their own in a fight kind of gal.
Yeah.
And
She's
I really like that kind of change of pace.
yeah, she's a very self-reliant character. She's not your typical um female character that seems to need a man to protect her or need a man to save her or do things for her or make her life better. She's very much a strong, independent woman of her own. And I think that's what makes her and Indy's relationship all the more interesting and compelling. And it's something that you want to watch. You want to see them together because there's that underlying tension where they're both have very strong-minded personalities and they both are very like, I can take care of myself, but yet trying to take care of the other one at the same time while the other is resisting. But it creates this beautiful tension that's palpable and makes you want to watch their interaction. It makes you want to listen to their dialogue and see their scenes together. So no, I think Karen Allen she's another it's another performance in this movie that I think is just spectacular.
What are your thoughts as we kind of move on to the action?
Mm-hmm.
I want to still talk about action, and I also kind of want to talk about motifs. We'll start with action. This movie is like an action adventure movie.
Mm-hmm.
But it's some of the most interesting action, especially for 1981, that you'd ever seen. I mean, his weapon of choice is a bullwhip.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously you got the punches, but even the Foley artist and the sound of the punch itself is a little bit larger than life,
Yeah.
but it just kind of works. But you got these action sequences where um Indy is like, hanging on to this car and he crawls under the car and he's fighting Nazis. This, I think, because it's one thing to have, I think with a sense of adventure, you have to have the action as well. And
Mhm.
that may be a hot take, but like think of some of the best adventure movies. Part of the adventure is this action. And
Yeah.
it doesn't always have to be beating people up, but
Mhm.
it's action. And I think partially because to go into this escape, like this escapism, for the audience, I mean, we're not punching Nazis, right? We're not running. There's a boulder coming right behind us. We're not running away. We're not trying to dodge traps or fend off snakes or push a statue into a wall,
Yeah.
um, or punch, a guy who his voice is, oh hi, you know, I'm Hans. Oh, put on the fisticuffs. Like that dude is just a brute.
Put him
You
the
know,
fisticuffs. Oh, I need that on a shirt.
he hit him with the he literally hit him with the fisticuffs. He said, "Oh yeah, hi, I'm Hans.
Oh
What
my
are you doing
gosh.
on this plane?" Um, I forgot how propellers work, so it chopped off my head. Um, but when Indy goes like and
Went
looks
straight into
down
the
and then he
Vitamix.
punches the guy like that, it's like, oh, he goes, what? Wow, so
Yeah.
um that's really good. But like the action, I don't think it's overbearing,
Hmm.
but I think it just adds to the sense of adventure.
Yeah. Oh, I agree too. And I mean, yeah, I don't think it's a hot take that the two often go hand in hand and almost I would say kind of have to go hand in hand, right? It's called the action adventure genre for a reason. Because even if, for us to feel that spirit of adventure, there has to be things happening, right?
Mhm.
We don't want to sit around and hear people talk about things. We don't want to or you don't we don't want to see people, driving just from place to place. We want to see them chase from place to place. We want to see them, interacting with obstacles and people that get in their way and people that want to stop them, and that conflict spills out, into, whether that's, a fist fight, a shootout, or what have you. Like we want to see, we want to see, we want to see things happening and exciting things that drive our story forward and drive our characters from place to place. And so, I think that the action in this movie is done off very well. I think you point out the kind of sound effects. They're very reminiscent, I think, of what George Lucas was inspired by. Those early.
Right.
They don't. If you think about what a actual punch sounds like, if you've ever been around someone when they get punched, like it's not. It's close to what the sound effect is in these type of movies, but it's always augmented a little bit, right? It's always altered a little bit, and it just it adds, I think, another layer to it, and it really harkens back to when you did all sound effects, was a guy with, a room full of toys, and he's is doing things on slide whistles and rubbing balloons together to come up with all these sound effects. And so I think that's just part of the fun of it. um but I think all the action feels well paced in this movie. I think um it's not overdone. I don't think I don't want more necessarily. I'll always take more Indy fighting the bad guy scenes. You can give I can never have enough of that, but it doesn't feel lacking to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and I just think the action set pieces add to that sense of adventure, because they're in different locales.
Mhm.
They're done with a purpose. It's not like a and as much as I love John Wick, like it's not like a John Wick, I'm just gonna kill everybody because
Yeah.
these are strategic action set pieces.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, the last thing I really wanted to talk about before we go into Rosebud and Thorn, is the motifs in this film, or at least just one. Uh, Indy is so iconic for that silhouette,
Hmm.
right, of the fedora. And if you notice in this movie, there are several sequences that that Spielberg uses, and he uses the motif or the image of the fedora or the shadow, to indicate that that's Indy without seeing Harrison Ford's face,
Hmm.
which I think is really really cool, and it adds to this mystery of this character, especially in the beginning. You don't see Indiana Jones' face until what's his face pulls out the gun,
Yeah.
and he turns around, hits the whip, and then walks forward, and then into you see his face.
Yeah.
But when he meets Marion Ravenwood for the first time in Nepal, you see that silhouette. When he is in the desert at Tanis, you see the silhouette behind the orange kind of sky.
Yeah.
And that it made, obviously Harrison Ford made this role iconic, but the whip and the hat became instant markers
Hmm.
of Indiana Jones, and for audiences, instant um, indicators of what was to come. Fun adventure.
Yeah. I think when you look at the whip and the hat, I think your point to the motif of like silhouettes and everything, or portraying them in shadow. I think really you can look at that as almost an accentuation of the hat, right? It without the hat, you wouldn't know that's Indy. I think perhaps my favorite moment is when they're digging at Tanis, and they've found the souls, and Indy sheds his disguise and puts on the hat.
Yeah, I love that.
He's stepping. It's almost like he's stepping in. You know, to who he is, and he's not afraid anymore. He doesn't feel. Yes, there's still daylight out, and people could still recognize him, but he's not afraid to step into this role of who he is. Um, I think you can look at the whip and the hat really kind of as, I don't know, symbols, I guess. You
Mhm.
look at the hat and it's battered. It's not new and fresh. It's creased. It's stained. It's dirty. It's been around the block a few times, and it's been through a few adventures. And I think it really kind of represents Indy's past.
Yeah.
It represents his past adventures, his past scars. We learned in some of the later movies that Indy had kind of a troubled upbringing. It wasn't your conventional childhood, and so some of his past trauma.
Yeah,
Yes.
and even if you think about it, when Indy is at the university, and he's teaching, he's clean shaven,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's got a nice suit on, he's got his glasses on. But when he's out exploring, when he's this archaeologist, he's got a rough kind of scruff. He's got kind of dirty, tattered clothes with the hat. And it's almost like, um, when he puts on that hat, he's finally who he is.
Mm-hmm.
And the mask is this. The hat is an extension of his kind of gruff nature. But when he takes it off, he has this mask of him being a professor. I mean, it's just so interesting and so interesting to look at.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that the hat is kind of an extension of Indy's more rough around the edges, more relaxed persona. he doesn't fit the mold, right? He's rough around the edges. He, is rough and tumble and is not gonna, he doesn't fit the mold of an archaeologist. He's an archaeologist with a heck of a lot of swagger to him, you know.
Yes, sir.
Um, so I think the hat, really kind of represents, Indy. He's rough and gruffness, and really that part of his character, his he's been around the block a few times, and playing off that, the whip I think is such a unique weapon of choice, and it's so unconventional. I think that really you can look at it as a symbol representing Indy's, cunningness, his wit, his intelligence, his willingness to think outside the box and do things differently. Um, because it is so non-traditional, and Indy isn't traditional. He doesn't do things the proper or the right way. He uses his brain. He's very smart. He's very witty. Very he's very street smart kind of guy. So I think the whip kind of you think of when he uses the whip to fight, it's a different element. It throws people off. They're not used to it because how many people do you know walking around with a bullwhip, right? How do you defend against a bullwhip? How do you counter an attack with a bullwhip? So I think those though I think those two symbols are really key to understanding Indy as a figure and as a character and as a person.
Yeah, I think it's just it's just so iconic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so cool to see that there's meaning behind the
Yeah,
iconography in
yeah.
a way. I mean, all of this was designed with purpose,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool. Before we go into Rosebud and Thorn, I also have some quick facts, fun facts
Mm-hmm.
about Raiders of the Lost Ark. Speaking of which, number one is that it was originally titled Raiders of the Lost Ark because they didn't think about making this into a series of movies until the first one was such a big hit. It was just going to be Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then obviously the main character was Indiana Jones. But for Temple of Doom, it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. So in true George Lucas fashion, they went back and renamed Raiders of the Lost Ark to Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. So if you look it up today, you're going to see Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. But when it came out in theaters, and you can even look, you can even look on the opening screen, opening shot, which they do that kind of edit where it goes from the Paramount Mountain to the mountain wherever Indy's at. It says Raiders of the Lost Ark, not Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is a fun fact. As well, Harrison Ford had dysentery. In the whole cast had dysentery except for Steven Spielberg and I
Uh-huh.
think Frank Marshall, because they flew in their food from Europe, from like England, and everybody else had to eat food from Cairo or from it was in
Yeah.
Tunisia. And so everybody got dysentery. So if you look at the sequence in Tunisia, Indy looks thinner, but he also was so sick that they were supposed to shoot this elaborate sword fight scene. And he talked to George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and was like, you know what? Can I just shoot him instead? And so he said something to the effect of like, I had never pulled out my gun at that point and in shooting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I pulled out my gun and just shot the guy instead of actually having to do the sword fight, which is so iconic now.
And
And
it's
that was
such an Indiana Jones moment. Like Indy wouldn't like unnecessarily fight the guy. Like fighting the guy is not his main objective there, right? He's trying to save um he's trying to save Marion. So what is the quickest way to get back to that objective? Shoot the guy.
yeah, I mean, and that is so funny. Speaking of Marion, a lot of Marion Ravenwood's stuff was kind of improvised. So when she grabs the pan and the guy's kind of running at her and she grabs the pan, that was like an improv kind of thing. She added a lot to the character that wasn't on the page necessarily. And I think that makes for a memorable performance, like we talked about.
Yeah.
Um, We also have, as I'm looking it up here, we also have the fact that the boulder was 500 pounds. It was super big. And actually, it says here that the track was 50 feet longer than its original construction. Steven Spielberg made it 50 feet longer to have more screen time for the boulder. But it was 22 feet in diameter and weighed, it was fiberglass, but it weighed 500 pounds. So the crew had to make sure that that it didn't kill Harrison Ford.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, we have some alternate casting. Sola was supposed to be played originally, or was rumored to be played by Danny DeVito.
What?
Yeah, isn't that wild?
I'm speechless. What?
Yeah, yeah, Danny DeVito. Um,
What
that
part of I need, a guy who's supposed to be Indy's friend, he's Egyptian, is really skilled, in like, digging and excavating and blah blah blah. He's known as the best. Indy calls him the best digger in all of Egypt. What part of that says, you know what? Danny DeVito. Give me Danny DeVito. Like what?
that would have been wild.
That would have been like
That would have been wild.
I would
And
have hated that.
the last thing, this is a fact I know you know. So even though we haven't talked about it, why don't you tell me the last alternate casting fact
I don't know what you're talking about.
for Indy himself?
It wasn't supposed to be Harrison Ford.
It wasn't supposed to be Harrison Ford. I thought you knew this. It
I mean,
was
I
supposed
knew
to be
that.
Tom.
I didn't. I thought
It
you
was
were.
Tom Selleck.
I didn't know that part.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No, I
Oh,
didn't know it was supposed to
not
be Tom
everybody
Selleck.
knows everything that I know.
No, not everyone has a master's degree. You're welcome.
Yeah. So Indy was originally supposed to be Tom Selleck,
Hmm.
and Tom Selleck had to bow out because he had Magnum PI, um, as he had commitments with Magnum PI.
Yeah.
So George Lucas asked Harrison Ford to be Indiana Jones, and the rest is history.
So you're telling
Which Tom
me.
Selleck is Indiana Jones. I could have seen it, but it would have been a different movie for
Yeah.
sure.
So you're telling me we
So
almost had Magnum and the Penguin as Indy and Sala.
yeah, talk
That
about a
would have been
multiverse.
that would have been such a different movie
Yeah, but
in so
they
many
originally had
ways.
him. They originally had it as Tom Selleck.
Wow.
Um, so for it to be Harrison Ford, I mean, and this made Harrison Ford was already a star,
Yeah.
but this cemented him as a Hollywood icon. This
Yeah.
movie. Okay, finally, we're gonna get to some rosebuds and thorns. Jake, what are your rosebud and thorn?
All right. So this is probably not surprising at all. I have lots of roses. The ones I wrote down were Harrison Ford, Paul Freeman, who he plays Belloc, Steven Spielberg's direction, Steven Spielberg's direction, the score by John Williams, and the writing of George Lucas, Philip Kaufman, and Lawrence Kasdan. Just to name a few. I mean, John Rhys-Davies, Karen Allen, really it's kind of a smaller part, but I really like Denholm Elliott as Marcus Brody. I'm so glad we get to see more of Marcus in the third movie. But the list, I could plant a whole field of roses with this movie. It's
Yeah,
that good. But one thing we really haven't talked about, which is surprising knowing the two of us, is that John Williams score. It's so iconic. And it captures the sense of adventure and fun while also being very attuned to the story, right? And being very in touch with the emotional beats of the story. I think this is one of his best scores.
I agree.
And
I
so it's
agree.
just it's another iconic part of the movie, right? You hear Da 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 da. You know who it is. It's just about as iconic as da 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 da. Another
And
John
who did
Williams
that?
score. John Williams.
John Williams.
Oh my gosh, it's
Or
like
yeah,
this guy's incredible or something.
or
Um,
da 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 da. Who did that? John Williams.
Williams.
Yeah, no, I actually I was going to save talking about John Williams because we're going to talk about him every single time,
Yeah.
but specifically for the third film,
Okay.
um, because we literally could do 4 whole podcasts talking about his work in every
Yes.
single Indiana Jones movie. So
Yes.
so there was purpose behind it, but I did want to at least mention it. That was actually going to be one of my roses as well. But
Yes.
please continue.
Um, yeah, I just have roses. I don't have I don't really I definitely don't have a thorn. My God.
No, my
That's blasphemy. Um the bud, really, it's not even a bud. I just wrote next to on my paper where I put bud, I wrote I want more. Um
yeah,
and it's why I'm so glad that, there are 4, soon to be 5 movies of Indiana
yeah,
Jones, because there's so many interesting and unique, characters that we've surrounded and we've introduced around Indy in this movie. And I want to see more of it all. I want to see more of Indy. I want to see more of Indy's friends. I want more because it's that spectacular.
yes. Kind of going off that, I don't have any thorns or buds. I only have roses as well. Um, Harrison Ford gets my first rose. Uh, this is like one of his greatest performances um, of all time.
Yeah.
He is so good. He is so good as Dr. Jones. It's like not even funny.
Yeah.
Um, I think he brings so much to that role. Steven Spielberg, obviously, this is one of his best films. It was nominated for Best Picture. It didn't win Best Picture. It probably should have won Best Picture. Um, I think he just brings so much to it.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest rose for me is John Williams' score because I was sitting in IMAX watching this movie. It's like without the score, it's boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's not, and it's the movie's not boring. But without the score just adds something to it. It's got that the romantic themes, but it like da 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 da,
Mm-hmm.
like it just adds so much that without it, it's like low key kind of boring.
Yeah.
And that just shows the power of score.
Mm-hmm.
But the Raiders March is so iconic. I've been telling everybody. So obviously, I work at a movie theater, and I have seen the Dial of Destiny trailer so many times, and I get chills every single time because of John Williams' score.
Yeah.
They kind of redid it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
for the trailer, and it literally every time I get chills. I almost cry because it is so iconic, but it is so well done.
Yeah.
So that's got to be my biggest rose. Yeah, obviously I could go on for days with roses from Karen Allen, who I think is spectacular in this film. You fall in love with that character
Yeah.
so easily. To the fact that I love archaeology and biblical like archaeology and history and stuff, probably because of Indiana Jones, but because this all kind of ties in, I also find it really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just the fact that this was like the first time they tried doing an action adventure movie like George Lucas and Steven Spielberg and just literally just like freaking kicked ass is like
Yeah.
it's just really cool. It's just really cool. Um, so question now for you is who do you think I am?
Okay, I have 2. You're a mix of the 2. I think you're Marcus Brody and um, Professor Jones, not Indiana Jones. I'm sorry to say, but his academic side, Professor Jones.
Yeah.
Um, I just sat there and I was watching the scene where the 2 army officers come to the college and they want to talk to Indy, and Indy and Marcus are just rattling off all this information about the Ark and its importance and its significance and everything, and this what's at stake here. And I was just like, yep, this is Ben. This is Ben. I'm not so sure that you could pull off all the heroic stunts and fist fights Indy gets into. I'm sorry to say. I'm not saying you can't do that. I'm just saying
No, but
that
I can't do
that doesn't strike me as something that you would do. Let's face it, you would not survive well in the jungle or in the desert, I don't think.
I would survive better in the jungle than the desert. And
Yeah.
that's purely because of my background as a Boy Scout. But that is basically the fact that I'm a Boy Scout and the fact that Indy is a Boy Scout.
Yes.
We find that out in the third movie. It's like the only similarity between that portion.
But I think your academic side, um, and just like your, I don't even know how I want to say this, like your thirst for knowledge and like
yeah,
your desire to like, I don't know, like it's not in an arrogant way, but everything is just like can be so apparent to you. Like like how I didn't know that Tom Selleck was almost Indiana Jones. Like
yeah.
you're just you're academic like that.
Did you folks hear this? He just went rapped, he just waxed on poetic about Rhapsonic. What is the see? This is the one thing I can't get right. He what is it? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have no idea what you're trying to say.
Here we go again. No, he's just like waxed Rhapsonic. Something
Use your
about how smart I am.
synonyms.
I'm so smart that I can't figure out how to say it. But that was just dang, I just ruined this whole thing. But did you just notice how he just called me smart? That was really nice. For me, I mean, you're Scylla through and through. Just very much an encouragement. He wasn't singing Civil War songs, but
No, I don't think Solid really is that educated on the Civil War, but
yeah. And even though he's married, he can riz up Marion Ravenwood. He goes like, "This is for the kids, this is for your wife, and then this one's for you." And I'm like, "Dog." So he said, "I am the monarch of the sea." So that's definitely my pick. But the real question is for all of you. Have you seen Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark or Raiders of the Lost Ark? What are your thoughts? Did you like it? Did you not? Leave all of those in the comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to follow us on social media, make sure to do so. The links are in the description and probably somewhere around here. For Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. But until then, cut.